This episode of the Cult Popture podcast was brought to you by our Patreon. If you want to tell us which films we should watch, get up to 2 extra exclusive podcasts a month, give us something to talk about in the post-credit scene at the end of each episode, or join us for our monthly movie club Zoom call where we discuss a film together, then please consider joining the cult and donating at www.patreon.com/cultpopture. All right, that fancy music that I presume you're putting in different music means that it's time for...
Yeah, I'm impressed that you remembered.
Yeah. It's time for Cult Popture Oscar season, a little bit later than usual because there was a global pandemic that delayed everything significantly.
Sorry.
Yeah, sorry about it. Yeah, so what we're doing is this is part 1 of our Oscars cheat sheet. We're going through and watching all the films nominated for Best Picture. And normally we do this in one episode, but we thought, hey, why not do it in 2, you know? What's the rush? The Oscars aren't till the end of April, so who cares?
Yeah. And I think as well, I love doing our annual Oscar episodes because it brings in a couple of traditions that we don't usually do year round with Cult Popture. One of being watching exclusively good movies to talk about good movies for a change. And the second one is bringing in our sometimes co-host, maybe the most sometimes of all the co-hosts we have because he only ever comes in to talk to us about Oscars. It's Aaron Richardson. Hey, Aaron.
Hey, guys. How you doing?
Buddy?
The frequently infrequent collaborator.
And despite what his last name may imply, he is not my son.
Nor is he rich.
Now, this would be a great way to segue into talking about The Father, which is nominated for Best Picture. We're going to be covering that next on the next episode. And
it's totally like the dad vote of the Oscars this year. Right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to watch The Father.
Yeah, it's this year's.
I've got no interest.
Darkest Hour or Ford v Ferrari.
It feels more like the second best exotic Marigold Hotel got nominated for Best Picture. That's the mood. That's the vibe I get.
I don't know, man. I watched that movie pretty recently, and I don't think it's a natural choice for fathers, particularly. Maybe mothers, definitely mothers, but probably not fathers.
All right.
So
I haven't seen it yet, so no more spoilers.
spoilers.
That's already spoilers enough.
That was for Best Exotic Marigold Hotel, right?
The second one.
Oh, yeah.
No, the first one's definitely... the fathers love the first one. The second one's totally is a big shift.
So there's 8 films nominated for Best Picture this year. That is The Father, Judas and the Black Messiah, MANK, Minari, Nomadland, Promising Young Woman, Sound of Metal, and The Trial of the Chicago 7. Randomly chosen, essentially, to be the 4 we're talking about today. We're going to be talking about MANK, Minari, Sound of Metal, and The Trial of the Chicago 7. 3 of the two, so Mank and Chicago 7 are on Netflix if you're listening to this and want to watch along. And depending on where you are, but most places in the world, Sound of Metal is on Amazon Prime. And then Minari is available on video on demand or possibly in a cinema near you. So, do we want to create like an order that we talk about these? Do we want to go like worst to best? We do that sometimes.
I think it's also important to maybe explain what a cheat sheet is, and because in case people have forgotten what the purpose of us talking about the Oscar nominees this year is. Because I don't think I technically don't think we did a cheat sheet last time. We did the time before that. I don't know if we did for this time. But essentially, what this is if you want to sound like you know movies, you know film, you're a bit of a cinephile, but you just don't have the time to watch all of the Oscar Best Picture nominees this year. We're going to watch them for you and tell you what to think.
Yep.
Essentially, we're going to give you 3 potentially differing opinions on each of the Oscar films, so that if you're at a dinner party and someone's talking about Minari, you can be like, "Oh, well, here's my opinion of Minari." Despite having never seen it. That's the point of the cheat sheet. It's just in 2 parts this year.
Yeah. So, when we do the Netflix Christmas specials, which is a similar thing but for bad movies, what we'll often do is say, okay, let's all on the count of 3 say what we thought was the worst one, and then we'll work our way up to the best one. So, and I think this we might actually all be in agreement. But the way I would rank these four we're talking about, Minari, Chicago 7, Mank, and Sound of Metal, I've got a definitive ranking, I think. But all right, on the count of three, let's talk about what we think is the weakest, worst feels harsh, but the weakest of these first four films. Okay, 3, 2, 1, Mank.
It's Mank.
It's obviously
Mank.
Oh, yeah. I haven't seen all of them, but I'm sure it's probably the worst of all of them.
Yeah.
It's in contention with The Father for me. I have such low expectations for The Father.
No, the Father, for me, again, not having seen it, The Father is one of those, of course it'll be good.
Yeah.
But I just don't want to have to watch it,
Yeah, and also it'll appeal to someone, whereas I can't imagine who's sitting around thinking that Mank is the best movie at the Oscars this year.
Well, statistically
it was kind of a surprise
speaking,
nomination, wasn't it?
No. When this film was announced 3 years ago, it was going to be nominated for Best Picture.
Yeah.
That was never up for debate.
Enough.
It's an old Hollywood film about Hollywood, directed by David Fincher, starring Gary Oldman. And it's... So yeah, to kind of give you an overview of what it's about, this is a kind of biopic of Herman J. Mankiewicz, who wrote Citizen Kane, and it's kind of about, but then it's also about like the politics of the era. It's my main complaint, first off, would be that it's unfocused. And David Fincher, I've said before, is my favorite director. Maybe not anymore, but
yeah, geez.
He is. Yeah, he's known for being such a focused director, demanding hundreds of takes from his actors, and then to release a movie like this, which is just so all over the place. That struck me as really strange.
You'd have to say that the problems, though, in that respect, probably stem from the script more than anything, right? And who's the person who wrote the script? Was his brother?
That was his father,
right?
Who passed away in 2004.
Yeah.
So don't fucking speak ill of the dead, Aaron.
Get out.
Oh god,
this is why we only get on once a year.
No, but you know what I mean. Like the unfocused nature of it, right? It presumably comes from the script and what it chooses to cover and encapsulate, right? So it's sort of hard.
I 100% agree, Aaron. And I would actually argue the directing is great. The directing's awesome. It's the script.
Yeah, that's the thing. This has the most nominations, and it feels like one of those. Yeah, it's very competent in every category, but not the best. And I could see it taking home a few technical awards because David Fincher, like the aim of this movie is clearly like if in 2 years after Citizen Kane came out, they were like, let's make a movie about the guy who wrote it. This is what that movie would look like. Obviously, it stars more modern people, including Bill Nye the Science Guy, who has a random little cameo in the film.
Wait, when's he in it?
He plays the politician.
I didn't notice him.
He plays the politician. What's his name?
The Democrat or the Republican?
Upton Sinclair, the one that the whole film was about.
It's Democrat, right? The communist.
Yeah, he's a Democratic Party. Yeah. But yeah, fun fact. Yeah, it's got Bill Nye the Science Guy in it for some reason. I think he actually might be related to Upton Sinclair, and that's why something like that. Anyway,
now Bill Nye's just a communist. Insisted on playing the role.
But like so even down to the one of the things that, and it's nominated for Best Sound, the new Best Sound Award, because they've decided to consolidate editing and mixing into one award now. It does. Like, it makes a very distinct choice with its sound mixing. I'm not sure it's the best one, but it's definitely the one that, like, it's nominated because it's like, you've made a choice, good on you kind of thing. Because it has this like compression on it, and it's maybe, to the untrained ear, you might not notice it so much, but it's this weird, like, it sounds like a 1940s film, which is like, it's a cool thing, but then I've heard some people say that they found it distracting. But then it's like he went through all this effort, shot in black and white, and there's some interesting behind the scenes stuff when you see that, like, shooting for black and white isn't just shooting a film and then putting a filter on it. It's like you actually have to light everything differently, and it's a whole different style of filmmaking. But then he still just shot it on digital, and it's in widescreen.
Yeah, it's weird to make that choice and then not like follow through on it fully, right?
Yeah. I totally didn't notice the sound. Isn't that funny? I edit this podcast. I listen back to audio for several hours a week, and halfway through the movie, I was like, isn't this movie supposed to have weird sound? But I also think I'm going deaf, which would be a great segue into talking about The Sound of Metal if this were at an appropriate time to do so. But it's not.
But alas, it is not. Hey, speaking about the sound category, I only just noticed that because I was looking up the nominations last night. I feel like we've spent many years bitching about how stupid it is that there's 2 sound things. But then when I finally saw the category Best Sound, I was like, what does that mean?
Yeah, it's so much stupider.
Yeah, it sounds...
like it should be... I mean, because you could say Best Sound Design feels like... But it's just like best sound, and it's like the nominees are a fart noise.
Yeah, it's like a single sound from a movie. Like when they used to
one moment.
Yeah, they used to give it to like a studio for like best sound. They give it to a moment.
Frankly, a fart noise was snubbed, I reckon.
Yeah, so Mank, I don't know. There's just something that just didn't grab me. It was like it feels like you're not paying attention to it.
Yeah.
I think like I started the movie and it starts with like Gary Oldman. He's in bed. He's like halfway through the writing, and it like has a kind of non-linear structure. And I was just like, what is going on? It feels like you walked into the cinema late, and I was watching it at home, and I pressed play, and then I was like, "What? Oh my gosh!"
No, absolutely. It's hard to follow. I don't understand what's happening at several points in the movie, and I gave this for like I was quite I was talking to you guys in our group chat about it while I was watching it, and I was kind of dunking on it, and then by the time it ended, I gave it like 3.5 stars on Letterboxd because there are individual scenes where I'm like, "Oh, it's Fincher. Hello, Fincher. Here you are." Like the scene where Mank is drunk and pitches Citizen Kane to the entire dinner party. I was like, this is a David Fincher scene. And then, you know, so looking back, I remember these great moments, but combined together, it just feels like a series of very loosely related scenes. And they don't have any like connective tissue or larger point to make.
Yeah, that's very true. Actually, it made I reckon I was probably like a third of the way through the movie when I was like, "What's the point? Why does this movie exist?" And it really like it was the first time I'd watched a movie and been like, why do we make movies? Like, are they even good? And it wasn't like when I finished it. Like, I actually think the last scene kind of almost rescues it
when he's accepting the Academy Award.
Yeah,
that was same thing. That was if it wasn't for that scene, I'd be like, that was a garbage fire of a movie. But then it's one line of dialogue.
Yeah,
I was like,
I had a good time. What the movie's about. Yeah. And it's like,
do you remember the line?
What's the line? Sorry,
nah, I can't remember the line.
He's accepted the Academy Award, and because there's the whole back and forth between him and Orson Welles kind of thing, because Orson Welles gets credit.
They're fighting for credit.
They're fighting for credit over who wrote it, and Mankiewicz is accepting the award, and Orson Welles isn't there, and he's like, this award's being accepted in the same way that Citizen K was written, with the absence of Orson Welles.
Nice.
Yeah. And the weird thing about that final scene, I reckon, is like it feels like it was sort of tacked on in a way, but somehow it rescues the film. It's almost as if like maybe it didn't exist in the first draft, and then Fincher was like, yeah, this film ain't looking too good. How do we rescue this bad boy?
Do you know what? This film does have the director doesn't have faith in it vibe to it. And I reckon, I don't know how to explain it better than that. And I wonder if it is like, he's like making this film and he's like, I'm doing it for Dad.
Yeah.
And he maybe doesn't get the screenplay as much as his father did.
Yeah.
And so there's a disconnect, and I can feel that disconnect.
Yeah. But so just to wrap up, I'll tell you guys, I'll say what it's nominated for. Best Picture, Best Director for Fincher, Best Actor for Gary Oldman, Supporting Actress, for Amanda Seyfried, Best Sound, Best Cinematography, Production Design, Costume Design, and Makeup and Hairstyling. And actually, should mention one like very positive thing I have to say about it is it's nominated for Best Original Score for Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross, who have been doing fantastic work for the last decade since they first partnered with Fincher for The Social Network. But their whole kind of shtick is that they're known for synths and very kind of like modern new wave music, and they did the entire score for this film on period appropriate instruments, and so it's it's that kind of thing of like, this is the film they would have made when the film is set. And so these guys, masters of their craft, throwing themselves this massive curveball. I don't think they'll win for Mank, but they're probably going to win the Oscar because they're also nominated for Soul, and that has an incredible score. But either or, they'll win.
Same people, two separate nominations.
Yeah, Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross.
Do we know if that's happened before?
They beat themselves for the Globe. I'm sure it will have happened before at some point, but I'm sure John Williams is like probably half of his losses are himself. Himself.
Yeah, I feel like there have been people who have been nominated in separate categories. Like someone's been nominated for both lead actor and supporting actor in 1 year.
Yeah, happened last year with Scarlett Johansson.
True, yeah, there you go.
But also Soul is Trent Reznor, Atticus Ross, and John Baptiste, who's Stephen Colbert's like music guy, but he did all the jazz, and then Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross did all the like the ethereal otherworld kind of score. So that was cool. Anyway, so that's Mank.
That's Mank. The movie that I should also say, I should have mentioned this early. I haven't seen Citizen Kane.
Oh yeah,
so
and
I watched this whole movie.
No, I haven't either.
Haven't you? Oh, interesting. So yeah, watch this movie not having seen and like, if it wasn't for you, Richard, I would assume that's what I'm not getting. Like, I'd assume like you kind of have to see Citizen Kane.
I've read reviews that say like the movie requires you to have seen Citizen Kane too much, and I've watched Citizen Kane within the last year. I guess start on a podcast about it, and it's like, if you're a big fan of Citizen Kane, there's probably like little things that went over my head that you'd pick up on, but I don't think it's going to fundamentally change your viewing experience, kind of thing.
And I don't think it should for a film, right?
Yeah.
You shouldn't create a film that's like, you'll only get it if you've seen the greatest movie of all time, and if you haven't, you're all dweebs. We don't care about you, dweeb.
So you're essentially describing Avengers Endgame.
All right, next film. Now, this one I feel like might be controversial, but 3,
oh no,
2, 1.
Trial of
Minari.
Chicago Seven.
Oh.
What did you guys say? I said Minari.
I said Minari. Aaron said Trial of the Chicago 7.
Wow.
Hey, well, 2-1, baby. We go on Minari, right?
Okay, so I will say, like, my level of enjoyment, the leap from Mank to Minari is like astronomical.
Yeah.
These three are like the other three we have to talk about are all very close together. I loved Minari.
Interesting. I don't know if I'd say I loved it, but I liked it more than Mank.
Yeah. So Aaron and I actually went to see this together in a cinema. We sat a little art house boutique theatre together.
Got an ice cream together.
Oh, yeah.
Let's compare that to my viewing experience, which was on my laptop that is days away from imploding in on itself, and twice during the movie the laptop crashed and I had to restart.
And no subtitles, and you don't speak Korean.
No, it did have subtitles, but they were very small, and I watched it with my flatmates, and I'm sure I've brought this up on the podcast before. There used to be like an anti-piracy ad that played on DVDs that'd be like, Bill's DVD works, Bob's DVD doesn't.
I love that ad,
and I always feel like Bob's DVD doesn't whenever I organise movie nights, because it's always either using like my shitty laptop or a dodgy streaming service.
I love how much Bob's family get like just infuriated.
Yeah, Bill's DVD makes sense, Bob's doesn't. It's like someone speaking a different language.
Yeah, it is.
Which is what Minari was. There you go.
Doesn't make sense. That's my review. It was in another language or something. I couldn't understand it.
Didn't get it.
So Minari is directed by Lee Isaac Chung. It stars Steven Yeun, who's nominated for an Academy Award for his performance, which is first Asian American to be nominated. And so it's the story of South Korean immigrants who try and achieve the American dream. They moved to rural America during the 1980s, and it's the patriarch of the family, played by Steven Yeun, is trying to start a farm growing Korean vegetables. And it's very like...
I did not pick up that this is set in the 1980s. Funny.
But yeah, it's nominated for 6 awards: Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actor for Steven Yeun, Best Supporting Actress for I need to look at her name.
The woman who
Yeun
plays the
Yeon.
grandma.
Who plays the
It is
grandma.
the grandma. Okay.
Yeah, and she's incredible in this film.
So good.
Yeah.
And it's also, there's one more. It's nominated for 6 awards, and Wikipedia tells you explicitly what 5 of them are, and then you have to go.
But he won't tell you the
go
6th.
further to look for what the 6th one is. Original score. Not winning that one. Sorry. Anyway, Minari. What do you guys think of the film?
Oh man, it was so good. It's sort of small, intimate tale. Quite different to, like, I would say probably the other end of the spectrum to Mank. And I think that kind of filmmaking appeals to me definitely. That kind of like small tale, like human tale about these people struggling. I really thought the performances particularly were fantastic. Particularly the sort of father. You get this sort of sense of, I don't know. Yeah, I kind of connected really, really strongly with his sense of like wanting to make something of his life and kind of the frustrations of he and his wife have been working as like chicken sexes. Yeah, chicken sexes, which as far as I can tell, is just like looking at chicks' buttholes for like 8 hours a day.
Cloacas.
Yeah, and just sorting them by sex.
Yeah. There was something I really connected to the film. I think was his kind of frustration and also his inability to realize that like he's damaging his family by pursuing his dream.
And also it's worth mentioning as well that Steven Yeun is doing this in his not his first language, because he actually English is his first language, and he's only really picked up Korean later in life. Because apparently there was a film called Burning a couple of years ago, and people kind of criticized that, or not criticized, but commented on the fact that he's kind of speaking like broken Korean a little bit. So to do like a feature film in like fluent Korean, full credit to him. And it's like I've seen Korean people say that like, oh yeah, there's some words where his accent like slips a little bit, but it's only like if you're from the area that you know. Yeah.
Well, that's pretty impressive. I can barely act in the language that I speak every day. And so.
But yeah, and I think because this is what we kind of spoke about after the movie, is that I love that the Academy is now recognizing these performances that are just very lived in and well realized characters. They don't need to have an Oscar scene anymore. Like there is a couple of ones where it's like, oh yeah, no, that's a really good scene, but they don't have to blow up and have this big moment of yelling or crying or something like that. It's just like, yep, I fully believe this character.
Yeah, this is a human being who exists. Particularly I think the grandma, that kind of struck me as like, this is not like a likable character particularly. Yeah. Like she's kind of selfish, a little bit like mean, and just like, just
all around crass.
Yeah. She's not like a typical grandma, and she's not like a typical...
She's not a real grandma. That's a line in the film.
Well, that's the thing, but also, it's not like a typical performance either where you're like, it's really kind of bombastic. It's just like, she, like you say, Richard, she just, inhabits this kind of crazy grandma.
It's one of those, like, I would be surprised if I met her and she wasn't like that. Yeah. Because that's just how like lived in it feels.
Yeah, but I don't reckon she would be like that, eh?
Yeah. No, I'm sure she's lovely.
I reckon she's an actress. I don't know. I think the acting, the ensemble acting in this film, like, commands a nomination. I wasn't blown away by Steven Yeun specifically though, and listening to you guys talk about it, without me like entering the conversation,
being able to get a word in,
has sort of changed my perspective a little bit on it, because I guess I was waiting for that Oscar scene. And that is a regressive way and a stupid way to look at good acting, but I think at the same time it's like, how do you judge, like, like, for example, the grandma, a fantastic performance, I thought, and I totally understand why she's nominated. And she doesn't really have an Oscar scene either. It's just a very specific character, whereas I don't know if I necessarily got that from Steven Yeun's performance. And I don't even know if I'd say Steven Yeun is the lead actor in the film. I found
it's the son.
It felt more like it was the son's story. And, you know, do you not nominate little kids for Oscars? I don't know what the situation
12
is.
and up,
there,
I think, is the predominant feeling, isn't it? What's the youngest ever winner? Was it 8 or 12?
I think
because it was Anna Paquin,
Haley
right?
Joel Osment?
No, it was like
The youngest ones I can think of are Haley Joel Osment, Anna Paquin, and Keisha Castle Hughes.
Quinzavali Wallace was like 8.
Right.
She was only nominated.
Well, that kid wouldn't be
In
8,
what?
would he?
Beast of Southern Wild.
Oh, right. No, well, I don't know. I don't know if that matters, but it's still significant that it's a very convincing bilingual performance from a little boy.
Yeah. Is that
who also feels like the center of the story? Not as badly as I think other weird nominations that for actors the Oscars have had when they determine the difference between lead and supporting. It does feel more like there just is no lead. But if I had to pick whose story it is, I would have thought it was the son's more than the dad's.
But I mean, Steven Yeun's in the majority of the film, kind of thing. Like, it's definitely like. It's not worth getting hung up on there, I think. But and also,
I think all my feelings are valid, Richard.
I think it is.
But this is an interesting thing as well, that like you think about the kind of performances that win supporting actor to lead actor, and it's like, and I think it's like, and you know, you talk about like character actors, and it's like they kind of get to play the more fun characters in some ways, those ones that are like, wow, this is such a big caricature, but it feels really real. Whereas
Gary Oldman and Mank,
but he's the lead actor in that, but like that Steven Yeun is like, he grounds the film with like this very, very real performance. So, and that's why, like, you know, the kid works, even though it's not a perfect performance. It's an incredible child performance, but you know, like,
I've got some tips.
And like the grandma being a little bit pushing the boundary a little bit more. But yeah, it's just a very, very solid performance and film.
Yeah. If I had to pick his Oscar scene, though, I reckon it's probably that one where he's like sitting outside of where they like take their kids to the chicken sexing factory for the first time, and he like takes his kid outside and is like sitting there smoking and like talking to him about like kind of what it means to be a man almost. Like if there was a scene in there that was like the Oscar scene, I reckon that's probably the scene. Even though like it's obviously very understated, but I think it kind of sets up the crux of what the movie is kind of about.
And that relationship as well, because part of what Steven Yeun's doing that makes the performances so incredible is facilitating that out of this child as well, and being this,
and all the other actors in the film.
But that, you know, he can have these scenes with, you know, however old the kid is, like he's kind of doing the heavy lifting to help that performance along.
I thought that the Oscar scene was when his wife like gives him the ultimatum after the guy's like, yeah, we'll do business with you, let's start next week, and she's like, you have to choose between the family or the farm. But one other thing I wanted to say about the grandma's acting as well, and this is big spoilers for Minari if you did want to see it, that I think maybe why she's been nominated is less because the character is so fun and enjoyable to watch, but also because she has a stroke 3/4 of the way through the movie, and her performance completely evolves to a brand new character almost. So I think that's probably it's the obvious acting nomination for the movie, I think, in my opinion.
But yeah, what else? Just talking about the film as a whole now, I did find I had a similar thing when I watched My Neighbor Totoro, and maybe it is like a East versus West storytelling kind of thing, is that there's like this overwhelming sense of dread throughout the movie. Like they have a next door neighbor who's a little bit quirky, but he's this religious guy, and they see him dragging a giant cross every Sunday, and I was like, he's going to be KKK or something. He's going to be burning these crosses,
or he's going to molest the kid.
Yeah, like just like
know?
anything like this, and then you keep like expecting like them to be victims of some horrific race thing or something to go horribly wrong, and things do go wrong throughout the film, but it's more of like about triumph of the human spirit and ingenuity and stuff like that, but then obviously something spoilers not going too deep into spoilers, but something horrible does happen, and it was kind of this cathartic release for me to be like, oh, finally.
Oh, thank God, it wasn't what I thought it was
finally
going to be.
these dreams are destroyed.
Yeah, it was when they were angry at the little kid for making the grandma drink pee, and they were like, go outside and get a bigger stick for us to hit you with. And then there was the scene of the little kid in the dark, like looking for a stick, and I was like, oh my God, a coyote's gonna get him.
Yeah. Well, and also because the kid has a heart problem. He has a murmur in his heart, and they keep talking about like, oh don't run, and it's set up multiple times, but then it ends up paying off in a positive way.
And also, I do think the tragedy of it, like the tragedy in the movie, sort of does take you by surprise. Or it certainly took me by surprise because there are so many setups in like other directions. You're not like, it's gonna be the grandma. That's what's gonna happen.
Yeah, it is interesting. Yeah, as well. Just a similar to me. Final kind of thought on something interesting on this film. This was nominated for best foreign film in at the Golden Globes. It's not in the Oscars. It's not eligible for the Oscars, but the Golden Globes award is specifically like best film in a foreign language, and so it can be an American film in a foreign language. I think the BAFTAs are the same. And there was all this outcry from people being like, this is the fucking most American film of the year. And it's like, it is. It's about the American dream. And if you want to say that America's like a melting pot of diversity, it's like, yeah, these are the stories you should be telling. And The Farewell last year had a similar thing where it's like, it was entirely in Mandarin, but it was an American production, so it couldn't be nominated for that. And then The Farewell didn't end up getting nominated for Best Picture. And so, yeah, they kind of like leave them in this weird in-between space. But yeah, it's just interesting that how these rules kind of fall, because this is an American production. It just happens to all be in.
Yeah, and the sort of, I guess, the nature of how the US film industry sees itself, right? You know?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, it's racism, right? That's the main problem, is that it's in a different language, so therefore it's a foreign film, Because even the Oscars have rebranded Best Foreign Film to Best International Film this year to kind of acknowledge. I think it's a good move, probably.
Yeah, because when Alfonso Cuarón won Best Foreign Film for Roma, and he's like, I grew up watching foreign films like The Godfather and Jaws, which is great. But so that is Minari. I'd say 2 thumbs up. It's a quiet film. Yeah. But next film to talk about. Everyone got the tip of their tongues?
I can only pick from the 2 that are left, right?
Yeah.
Cool.
And
I know what Aaron's gonna say.
All right. 3, 2, 1.
Trial of the Chicago 7.
Trial of the Chicago 7.
Now again, fucking loved Trial of the Chicago 7.
Loved it. Loved it. Oh, blown away by it. We have talked about this one a little bit already on the most disappointing films of 2020, which, for those who aren't in the know, is just what we call our year-long wrap-up of films. We weren't disappointed by it. But yeah, I loved Trial of Chicago 7. I watched it so late in the game, so far after anyone, it was a few months after it had come out. I'd heard kind of middling things about it.
Yeah, people are like, it's good.
And then watched it. Yeah, I'd seen the whole, like, I think we brought this up before, but like, Aaron Sorkin is too good of a writer to be paired with a director as bad as Aaron Sorkin, which is I still don't get that. I don't get why. I would love for someone to tell me why it's bad directing.
It's competently directed. There's nothing impressive about it, but it fits the story it needs to tell. There's some great scenes in it as well. Like there's I can't actually remember. It's when they're reliving because part of the plot hinges on a character not saying what they meant to say, and when they relive that moment and they're doing like a mock cross-examination, it's a fantastic scene. It's a classic Sorkin written scene, and he was able to direct it like with this, similar to how Danny Boyle did in Steve Jobs.
It's also such a specific thing to communicate filmically, and I could easily see a lesser writer giving up on that scene and just trying to communicate the same idea in a similar way. To make a compelling scene where the end of the scene is essentially you fumbled your words and said something when you meant something else. That sounds like a nightmare to screenwrite. You know what I mean? It sounds boring. It sounds boring. It sounds silly, but it's not. It's very compelling. But shall we say what it's all about? I think we've mentioned.
Who wants to take it?
Go, Aaron.
No. Yeah, I'll take it. So basically, the trial of the Chicago 7 is about 7 representatives from various groups who are charged with
inciting a riot.
Inciting a riot at the 1986. 86? No, that feels too late. Is it
68?
1968, thank you.
Yeah, the number's right.
1968 Democratic National Convention, where they're basically going to elect some guy who's very unpopular with a lot of the left-wing political people who are against the Vietnam War. So they basically organize a protest at this event at which there's
like a peaceful protest.
Yeah,
which
peaceful
is,
protest.
They're perfectly within the rights to do.
Yeah, but the protests turn violent largely as a result of the police action in the city, and the sort of leaders of the protest are charged with inciting a riot, and the film basically follows sort of cutting between scenes from the protests and also their trial, basically, in which they're basically prevented from being able to present a case in a free and open court as one would hope.
Because the whole thing of the Chicago 7 is that it was very much it was a like a symbolic thing, essentially. It was they were, you know, it was a trial by public eye kind of thing, and they just wanted to have a very public, like, look how we're taking down these hippies kind of thing. It's an incredibly well-written film. Great cast as well. Sacha Baron Cohen's nominated Best Supporting Actor, but you got Joseph Gordon-Levitt, Michael Keaton shows up, John Carroll Lynch, Frank Langella is horrifying in the movie as the judge. Eddie Redmayne, Mark Rylance, fucking so good. The cast is phenomenal. And
was Rylance nominated for anything?
Nah.
That sucks. Although I guess I would nominate him for Best Supporting Actor as well. Is there a lead actor? Is Eddie Redmayne the main character in this movie?
I mean, I don't know. We'd have to like Sacha Baron Cohen's kind of the only one that's been singled out, but that's for supporting.
Yeah.
As the resident actor.
I don't know if I want to talk necessarily about performance so much. I thought it was like a good performance by Sacha Baron Cohen, but I wasn't like blown away by it.
I was blown away by Frank Langella as the judge and Mark Rylance as their attorney. But Sacha Baron Cohen, I was like,
it's just because he's British and he's doing a really good American accent.
Because he did Borat in the same year. It's like, look at the range.
Yeah. Look at him. He can do one weird accent to another sort of weird accent. Yeah. Actually, I don't know if I agree necessarily with him doing an amazing American accent. Having heard his British accent recently for kind of the first time, I was like, it's not that good.
Yeah.
Is it more that and this was in the trailers, but I feel like it was maybe a famous line from the case where he's like, "Give me a moment, friend. I've never been put on trial for my thoughts before." Like that feels like an Oscar-winning line. You know what I mean?
It feels like a sort of vaguely like not virtuoso performance, but like it's kind of one of those larger-than-life fun performances where you're like, "Hey, fabulous!" Like for me, there are a couple of scenes in there that are like kind of too goofy in a way. Like there's one scene where Sacha Baron Cohen and his like stoner hippie friend are like walking into the court. Someone throws an egg at them and he like catches the egg and he's like, "You don't know what to do with it, do you?" And I was like, just don't put it in, man. No, what do we need for this scene?
Though, that you bring up the kind of some of the absurdity of it, because some of it was like dialed back and a lot of it, like there is the film has a very like woohoo kind of ending where Joseph Gordon-Levitt, no, it's not. So Ed Redmayne reads out like the list of all the people who have died in Vietnam, and that didn't happen. But it's very much like the big victory at the end of the film. But Yahya Abdul-Mateen's character, who he's the 8th member of the Chicago 7, and he was put there essentially just like, you know, by the prosecutors, just so it's like, oh, we're prosecuting a black guy as well. And it was very much like he had nothing to do with any of them, but he was like forced there. He was there without his constitutional right to representation. The judge wasn't hearing any of it. And then he kept on trying to speak up, being like, I have a right to an attorney and you're like not giving me that right. And the judge gets him sent out, roughed up, and then is forced to appear in court like bound and gagged. And you're like, fuck, that's like messed up. In real life, he had to do that for a week.
What?
Yeah. And so like every day for a week, he's like, you can't appear in my courtroom unless you're bound and gagged.
Fuck.
But a lot of these things and all the insane calls that the judge makes actually help to overturn some of the convictions later on when they appealed, because it's like, yeah, actually this judge was being a fucking dick.
Yeah. Wasn't there like, I feel like there's a statistic they have at the end, which is like 70% of people appearing in front of the judge like rated him unfit to be on the bar or something?
No, it was like other judges did, like other legal experts,
Jesus,
like said that he was incompetent.
Yeah. So it's a fantastic performance, though, to be fair.
I think the reason I like this movie so much, and it's very Sorkin. It's a very Sorkin reason, is that it's so emotionally charged. Out of any of the Oscar nominations that I've seen this year, I don't think, or even any of the films I've seen the last year, I don't think I've found myself more angry and more like thirsty to see justice prevail than watching this movie, especially like coming out of the Black Lives Matter protests and things like that. Like, it's a movie.
Yeah, well, because the film's about police brutality.
And it's so fucking anti-cop. My God, this is like the most anti-cop like mainstream blockbuster I think I've ever seen. And I think because of that, I feel so motivated. Like I'm constantly engaging with the movie emotionally because of how angry or happy or excited or, you know, the fire in my belly is alight, I guess, watching this movie.
Is it's insane, because also Mank as well, it has a lot of like Trumpian election kind of things going on around it, and and this obviously, you know, the police brutality and all this talk of like protests and who's responsible for inciting riots. Is it the protesters or the police? And it's like, God, I mean, this script was written in 2007, and it's about something that happened in 1968, and it's like, why are these things still relevant in 2020? It's like, they shouldn't be relevant from 2007, but yeah, the fact that it goes back even further, because it was originally Spielberg was going to be directing it in 2007, but then the Writers Guild strike happened, and he was going to have cast like mostly unknowns kind of thing, and then Sorkin just held on to the script for 13 years.
Wow.
But yeah, great film. And also one thing I love about this as well, because they bring in the former Secretary of Defense to come in, and they cast Michael Keaton for this tiny role, and it's one of those cool castings where it's like, it immediately tells you the gravitas of this character.
Yeah.
True.
It's great, and he's fantastic in it, and it's such a great like bit part for him.
Yeah, that's true. That actually is a very good point. Yeah. Picking someone like that to fulfill a role like that. I feel like I was going to have a point about that, but I actually don't think I do. One thing
I love it. It's great. It's good.
One thing I will say about the film, and like, I don't think I'm as pro it as you guys. Like, I think the message is incredibly important, and I think the sort of things that it discusses is important. And I agree 100% with you, AJ. Like, I was viscerally like angry about what's happening in the courtroom. But I guess for me, it was like, it felt like a really good story, like well told, but not like, you know, this is incredible, exceptional filmmaking. Right. You know what I mean? Like, I think it was
well written, but wasted on a director like Sorkin.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. Get out of the game, man. Stop taking it from good directors. Nah, but I don't know. There was something about it that just didn't take it over the edge for me. You know, like, it sort of felt a bit like sort of Spotlight or, you know, one of those kind of past movies. It's like
Oscar bait.
I think
Yeah.
I would say it's a little bit more like it's has that kind of like Forrest Gump kind of feel to a bit more than Spotlight. Like Spotlight is very like flat kind of in a way, but like in a good way. Whereas this is a lot more like you feel inspired watching it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
I guess it is sort of in that kind of Forrest Gump vein, which is like, it's a great movie. And like in this particular instance, it's kind of about challenging issues, but the movie itself doesn't feel challenging to watch. You know what I mean? Like it feels inspiring rather than challenging.
Like they put another couple of hours on it. You're like, fuck, this is a real slog to get through.
Yeah, exactly. I want it to be harder. No, but I don't know. I guess, yeah, it's like, it's really good storytelling, and it's an important message, but it just feels a bit Americanized to me in some way. Like it feels kind of it's sanitized
and stuff like the thing at the end, how he reads out the names. And it ends with like, order in my court, order in my court. And that's very like a very Hollywood ending. But yeah, like overall, I really like this film.
Yeah, and you should watch this film because it's about important stuff, man.
Yeah. So final film.
I would argue, is it the front runner for Best Picture? Do we have a front runner?
No, we do have a front runner. It's Nomadland.
Oh, okay.
But if it's not Nomadland, it's Trial of the Chicago 7. Those are the. It's one of those things. Like it's like those are like first and second, but it's like my feelings for Minari and Mank. You know, it's like they're next to each other, but come on,
come on.
Right. Yeah, I haven't seen Nomadland yet.
Well, we'll talk about it in a couple of weeks, but yeah, it's won every award kind of thing. It's one of those ones where it's like whether or not it's the best film, it's just like the path it's on leads straight to victory.
Yeah.
So last film to talk about. Now, so AJ and I obviously have had the same, but Aaron, you move your rankings around a little bit. Last film we've got is Sound of Metal. Is that your favorite one?
Oh yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Holy
yeah, man.
shit.
Holy shit, right? This movie's it is breathtaking.
Yeah.
I thought this
is Sound of Metal, directed by the directorial debut, I believe, of Darius Marder.
No, I think it's no, you're right. You're 100% right. Because he wrote something in like 2012 or something, right?
Place Beyond the Pines.
Yeah. This is the movie where, you know, before where I was like watching Mank and I was like, why do we make movies? Are they even good? And I was halfway through this movie and I thought about thinking that and I was like, yeah, they are fucking good. And this is what it looks like.
Yeah. What a great way to put it, Aaron. Totally. This is about I'll take this one, fellas. This one is about a drummer in like a metal band. His girlfriend is the lead singer. And
they're like a duo.
Yeah, sure, yeah. And they're both like very clearly passionate about their music. And then one day the main character just goes deaf. He loses his hearing. And the remainder of the movie is essentially about a deaf man coming to terms with that and trying to heal when, you know, the thing that was essential to his livelihood and his passion and his art and his will to live has been taken away from him.
And it's... Yeah, and so he moves into this community, and so it stars Riz Ahmed as Ruben, the main character, and Olivia Cook plays his girlfriend, and a guy called Paul Rassi plays like the leader of the community. And like Sound of Metal is like a textbook. It's one of those things, and maybe it's because of it's the year of COVID and not much came out. But Sound of Metal is like your quintessential, actually the best movie of the year, but gets snubbed for the Oscars kind of thing. It was so cool to see it. And then it's like, Riz Ahmed, like performance of the year, but then also supporting performance of the year. Paul Rassi, man, what a good, fucking incredible performance.
Yeah, man.
And again, it's like he does have that Oscar scene kind of, but the Oscar scene isn't. It's spoilers for Sound of Metal, but it's when Ruben is forced to leave the community and Paul Rassi's character is kicking him out. And, you know, it's one of those classic, like Philip Seymour Hoffman and Almost Famous, where it's like, you could read this script and be like, oh yeah, fuck yeah, like I'm going to really tell him to get fucked and get out of here. Or, you know, you could read it and like Philip Seymour Hoffman did in that scene in Almost Famous, is like you read that and you go like, no, like he's hurt. He's really hurt, and he doesn't want to have to do this.
Because there's a scene earlier on as well that kind of talks about that, right? Where he's like, you've become a huge part of this community. We'd really love you to stay and like join it. So it's like, there are kind of breadcrumbs towards that scene in like a way that's like, this is how you should play the scene, and it's so good, man.
Yeah, and because there is like, because there's kind of like it's become a more mainstream ideal now, but that like, deaf people, and that's kind of what the film is about, is that like deaf people don't think there's anything wrong with themselves, and that they're able to lead these like perfectly rich lives without being able to hear. And it's kind of like the movie shows you that, and it has like a really I guess sympathetic's not the right word, but it has that like a really honest and loving portrayal of the deaf community, but from the perspective of someone who kind of like doesn't get it, or at least not yet.
Yeah, and I'd say that Paul Rassi is that Oscar scene that you mentioned, Richard. One of the reasons I love that is because it answered I don't want to say plot hole, but a question that I felt was being avoided in the movie, because essentially Riz Ahmed Rubin gets an operation that will give him an approximation of his hearing back, and that's
he gets a hearing aid.
a hearing aid, and that's why he's kicked out. And the whole movie, leading up to this, I'm thinking like, it's his right, of course. Like, I would do that. It's so like, why would anyone tell him he shouldn't do it? And then when he gets kicked out, Paul Rassi essentially says, like, I'm paraphrasing, but he says like, we don't want people to think there's anything wrong with them. And so if you are here having quote unquote cured your deafness, people are going to fall back because they can't afford the surgery, and will now go from seeing themselves as living full lives to living with an ailment. It's really good. And I thought the sort of the final act of the film as well, which is post
final fucking shot of the film. My God.
Yeah. After he gets his hearing aids, and it's sort of like it's like this bitter sweetness because they're not perfect, and it's sort of him like adjusting to society, and it's nothing bombastic, like his girlfriend doesn't leave him or anything crazy like that. It's just
she does.
It's just
I think the thing about that is like, she doesn't leave him, and that's far more interesting than like, because when she basically drops him off at the center for addiction for deaf people, you kind of get the sense that like she's probably going to go away and betray him with someone else. But then the actual ending of the movie is like them realizing that although they helped each other to kind of heal, they're better off without each other.
Yeah,
which I think is
because they were drug addicts together, and then they kind of essentially both separately got clean.
Yeah,
and I think realizing that's like maybe the only thing we had in common was drugs.
No, because he's been clean for 4 years. So I think the suggestion is she kind of helped him to get clean, and he helped her to kind of stop cutting herself. But they weren't necessarily after that healthy people. Because of just the way that they interact with each other and their kind of personal habits, I guess. But yeah, I just think that scene in bed where he kind of realizes that she's not really in love with him, and that he realizes that maybe their lives would be better if they were separated, is so amazing. Like, you basically see it in like, 2 seconds, his realization of like...
Yeah. This is honestly, if you haven't seen this movie, just go out and watch it right now. It's incredible. And like the kind of the thing I said about this film, and that it was like, for me, it was almost like a twist for the film, is that because throughout the whole movie, it's like, he like sells his car to get money to pay for the surgery and stuff like that. And it's like the movie is about addiction. And it's like, and kind of, it's the moment he's being kicked out, but it's like, you really actually need to take a look at yourself. And think about what you've been doing and how it's been hurting people around you because you're so desperate to get your hearing back. And it's like, fuck, yeah, he's like this. He's behaving like an addict. Yeah, he's addicted to hearing.
And well, exactly, because hearing, and it's not necessarily drugs. Hearing is in this film is used as to represent something you used to have that you loved and that you maybe took for granted that you don't have anymore. Because there's nothing wrong with being a deaf person and wishing you could still hear, but there is something distinctly unhealthy about coveting something you can never get back. You know, and
Yeah.
this is a movie that addresses that and says the key is not to get it back, but to find a way to heal and live your life going forward. And like, I've quietly been very afraid of losing my hearing. And when I said before that I think I'm going deaf, I'm not actually. But like, I've often thought like, man, it would suck to go deaf. This movie made me less scared of going deaf. Like the premise for this movie was, I was like, that sounds horrifying. But at the end of the movie, when he just seems so at like this kind of, it's like he's at peace, but it's this disgruntled, cynical peace, and it's like, I don't know. It made me feel less afraid of that, something like that happening.
Well, that's kind of the nature of the movie, right? Is, you know, their ability to accept change, you know, and I guess I think they say it in like Alcoholics Anonymous, right? To accept the things I know I can't change. Yeah, it's just like, he's kind of this character who's like desperate to kind of control his world in a way, and that's not really coming to terms with addiction, or that's not really conquering your addiction if your entire life requires you to just like control every aspect of it in order to not take heroin.
And it's like, and it's the whole, and like just the like bargaining and all these like different roundabout ways he tries to go through these things. It's just like, this is just really unhealthy. But incredible as a directorial debut. This I hope this one's best sound, because
you have to think so.
The whole story is told through sound design. And it's really intelligently picking moments when to get inside his head and, you know, not be able to hear anything, and the way it kind of shows what you hear through a hearing aid, and then like what his kind of, as he's losing it but not quite deaf, what all those sound like. But yeah, man, this is such a good movie.
So good. And such a good performance as well. Like, you know, he basically anchors the film, a 2-hour film, and it's basically just him kind of reacting to things and like talking as well, I guess. But, you know, a large amount is like from what's not said. And also like, man, some of the choices are just so interesting, eh? Like, I don't know, I haven't seen a great body of his work, but he's shredded in this movie, like absolutely jacked, and like, you know, it doesn't scream of something that's like specified in the screenplay of like you have to be jacked in order to play this role, but it's like, it's such a good choice because, you know, it shows his kind of almost militant
power. It
commitment.
speaks to his power.
Yeah, but it also...
And like the control he has over his own body.
Yeah,
and like
exactly.
the standards he sets for his own...
And that kind of militant commitment to like, you know, he's an addict, so he's going to control his addiction by being like super healthy, which is just like... amazing in how much it says about this person who's still like clearly on the cusp of being an addict because he's now addicted to being healthy. And
he's also like, because you see his getting ready routine, and it's very like, you know, he does push-ups and smoothies and whatnot. And it's and also because he's jacked, but he's also quite wiry. Man, and
the Riz Ahmed style, baby.
But he I mean, you'd hope any other year that he would be winning Best Actor, but he is up against Chadwick Boseman for Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, which is essentially in the bag for him.
You think because of...
Really?
Have you seen the movie?
I have. He's very good in it, but I don't think the movie is fantastic. I really want you to watch it, Aaron. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah, totally.
Because it's a very stage movie.
Oh my god!
Yeah, because it is based on a play.
Someone thought Ma Rainey's Black Bottom was better than you.
What are you talking about?
It was a great movie. What else is? What else is Sound of Metal nominated?
So Sound of Metal is nominated for picture, actor, supporting actor for Riz Ahmed and Paul Rassi, original screenplay, film editing, and best sound.
Nice. Well, I hope it wins all of them. Shall we wrap up part 1 here then?
Yeah, I mean, well, we don't have any more movies to talk about. So.
Exactly.
But so you guys haven't seen any of the other 4 at the moment, have you?
No.
No, I haven't yet, no.
Better wrap this up quick.
So we will be covering the other 4 movies in 2 weeks' time. So tune in for Cheat Sheet Part 2. If you liked this episode, then please consider supporting Popture either through Patreon or through just being a supportive fan, which you can do all over the place on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, wherever you get your podcasts. We've also got a Discord server that you can join, and we've also got a Patreon, as I said before, patreon.com/cultpopture. We're on TikTok. I'm on TikTok. Follow me on TikTok. I'm begging you. That's Cult Popture and AJ from Cult Popture on TikTok. Any final thoughts? Out of any of the 4 films we've talked about so far, are any awards in the bag for any of these 4 films?
I would say best sound for Sound of Metal, and I would say best screenplay for Chicago 7. And they'll be the ones I'd hope for.
Nice. Cool. Well, all right, everybody. We'll see you next time, and stay tuned for the post-credit scene after this music.
Thank you for taking the lion's share of the outro, because things were very loud where Aaron and I are.
They're still happening.
They are.
Oh, yeah, it's still going on, baby.
All right, everybody.
And we'll see you next week for The Little Mermaid.
Enjoy the Oscar season.
There. Here's the fancy Oscars music.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the post-credit scene. This is the scene at the end of each episode where we discuss a thing together that is submitted to us by our Patreon. If you want to be involved in this, you can donate $5 or more over at patreon.com/cultpopture, and you get to contribute to the post-credit scene. And today's post-credit scene comes to us from Craig Major, and he asks, what is the best film that you'll never, ever watch again? Do you have an answer for this?
Well, there's a few ways of answering this, because I think obviously the answers he's kind of looking for are like Requiem for a Dream, which I love that movie. I've seen it a few times, but
about to watch it again.
Yeah. I would happily watch it again. just try and stop me, Craig. But I don't know, but I actually feel like my answer for this is probably more accurately like a film that I really liked that I'm just never going to get around to watching again. Because I distinctly remember one night I was going to watch a movie, and I was trying to decide what to put on, and I really felt like watching Big Fish. It's one of my favorite movies of all time, and I was like, I really feel like watching Big Fish, but then I was like, I should watch Jaws. I've never seen Jaws, and if I watch Big Fish now, that's like 2 hours of my life that I could watch a new movie I haven't seen. And I got like sad that I'm never going to see every movie. I'm like, what if I die and I've never seen The Godfather 2 or I've never seen Jaws? I have now, thanks to this podcast, but I ended up watching Big Fish again because I was like, no, well, I shouldn't put this pressure on myself to watch every movie ever made, or I shouldn't get down about this. I should watch Big Fish because I know it makes me happy. But there's good films that I'm like, for instance, I can't imagine what necessarily circumstances I would watch Minari under again.
Sure, yeah. I mean, it's amazing how probably most movies that I've liked I probably won't watch again. Yeah. Like, I barely ever rewatch movies now, and I can't imagine myself necessarily going out to do that. But in terms of answering the question for what I think he was trying to get at, which was like, oh my God, that was horrifying. I'm never going to watch that again. Aren't you? No, I was actually going to say Gus Van Sant's Elephant. Have you heard of Elephant?
Yeah,
I saw that movie a couple years back.
School shooting film, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of borderline a spoiler, but there you go. It's a very well made film about a very distressing topic, and so I don't think I'll ever watch that again, but I remember being very impressed by it. I would have said the same about Hereditary and Midsummer, but then they kind of became too popular for me to avoid, and everyone around me was watching them at one point or another. But yeah, and also of course Salo, 120 Days of Sodom. Do you know what? I could see myself watching
the
Salo
film which
again.
you take every opportunity to mention that you've seen.
It's I don't know. I could see myself.
You're about to say
again.
it's great, but I feel like you can't, in good conscience, say it's great.
It's great. Salo, 120 Days of Sodom is a great movie.